back to another episode of RPMbassy. Today's going to be a short and sweet one on an album that most of us probably already know, but it is a damn good album nonetheless, and it is 1979's Regatta de Blanc by The Police. So, as I say, most people probably already know this album, or at the very least are familiar with songs from it. Who hasn't heard of Message in a Bottle, who hasn't heard of Walking on the Moon, or maybe even some of the other tracks on here. And there are some great tracks on here aside from those two sort of main singles. So, I mean, this was a pretty huge album for them. It's the second album. This kind of like was the one that really pushed them to the limit. Both of those two singles were number one hits. The album itself was a number one hit. You know, it's, for me, I know John will probably disagree with this, but for me, this is kind of like the definitive Police album. Although Ghost of the Machine is pretty damn good as well, actually. I think John prefers Synchronicity, but I think this or Ghost of the Machine would be my pick, but probably this. It's such a great sounding album, such a simple album as well. And it was like the production sort of history of it is remarkably simple. You know, it's basically like the band and Nigel Gray, who was like doing the engineering, and that's kind of like it for notable personnel. And I mean, he did the album prior and he did the album afterwards, Zenyatta Mondata. And yeah, like as far as the engineering goes, like it sounds amazing. Especially obviously songs like Message in a Bottle. You've got that excellent Andy Summers clean chorus guitar sound, which is like really, really iconic, and I think in many ways probably inspired a lot of those kind of like clean chorusy kind of breaks in some of the sort of like metal that you'd get towards the mid to the end of the 80s. That really, really pristine, clean sound. I really like dig how it sounds on here, and it sounds like really excellent on record. And obviously Stuart Copeland's drumming, the kick drums on this in particular, sound really full and rich, and it doesn't have that kind of that 70s sort of I don't know if you're familiar with the sort of the tortilla sound, as they call it now, I think, with the snare and stuff like that, but the whole kit sounds really poppy and punchy, and like there's got real great snap to it. It lends itself really well to what is otherwise quite like a bare bones mix, you know, quite a sort of pared down arrangement of songs. It like fills it out and doesn't crowd the mix at the same time. It's just like expertly done. And then obviously Sting and his vocals and the bass, like it all comes together in such a simple way, but it really does have like such a solid foundation that it just works perfectly. The title itself, I don't think it actually means anything in any language technically. From what I recall, it's meant to be kind of like a loose translation of white reggae, but then like regatta is like French for like a boat race. So, you know, boat race de white? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, all of their album titles are a bit weird and off kilter. But yeah, as I say, like really simple and straightforward like production history. This basically, like, they recorded it in about 8 months. It was out about 2 months after that, which kind of goes to show how like straightforward it was to put it all together. From what I read as well, Stuart Copeland basically says like they kind of just sort of went in and recorded, and they didn't really need to practice or anything. They just kind of threw stuff down, and it was very like a very relaxed process. And the actual like bulk of the work, even though it was spread over a few months, the bulk of the work was about 4 weeks worth of work, which, I mean, like, to come out with this after like a month of input and, you know, trying to wrangle a band together and get this, like, I mean, bravo. It really is excellent for what it is. If we go through the tracks, or some of the tracks quickly, Message in a Bottle, obviously everyone knows this. It's an absolutely banging track, and the guitar is sort of the main draw for this one. That kind of suspended chord or suspended arpeggio vibe running through the duration of the song, basically. I didn't realise until fairly recently, there's a guitar YouTuber called Paul Davids, who I recommend checking out for the story on this one. he has sort of broken down the individual harmonies. I always assumed it was one guitar line, but actually there are sort of two sets of guitar playing harmonized notes, and that is what is missing when you play it on guitar yourself, and you just have, you know, one set of hands and one set of strings. In particular, that track, I just love the guitar on it. The second track, Regatta de Blanc, the title track, I get, you could call it an instrumental. It kind of is, and it kind of isn't. Like, there are words in it, like they're not words. It's just like but like a great song nonetheless. Quite interesting, actually. Again, looking at the production history, they put No Time This Time, which is a B-side from one of their oldest singles. They put that at the end of the album, and like, I don't think they needed to. Like, the album's like 45 minutes long, and perhaps it was, you know, perhaps the expectations have changed over the years, but nowadays, like, sort of, if you'd just gotten rid of that song, like, it's only about 4 minutes long. I think, you know, if you'd ended up with like 38, 39 minutes, would have been fine. You know, that's kind of these days where I kind of really settle in with an album. Like, I can't be dealing with anything far too long. You know, especially when you, in the 90s, when you had bands who were like, right, we're gonna use up the full length of a compact disc. We're gonna go full 72 minutes. Like, God save me! Like, that is a waste of everyone's time. But I mean, it's a grand song to have on there. I love that sort of like fast, frenetic energy. It's really, really punky and like quick, and that actually throughout the album, like Stuart Copeland's drumming is so fast and like articulate, and he's got like this. It's almost like it's like a jazz player playing punk. Basically, it's jazz at punk speeds, and I love how much hi-hat and how sort of syncopated some of his work is. The sort of weird off-kilter timings that I feel like for a lot of people it's probably like a real introduction, like first introduction to what would be polymeter, not polyrhythm. I think polymeter is where it stays on a specific grid, but you've got syncopated notes within it. I'm not good enough at music theory to know if I'm right or not, but I think it would be polymeter or polymetric drums in these songs. But certainly the hi-hat is like all over the place, but it fits very, very well at the same time. Walking on the Moon as well. That, again, the chorus on that, the space and the feeling of it, couldn't come up with a more perfect title if I tried. That song is so perfectly put together in terms of the sound, the space, the mix, like excellently put together. My favourite from this, though, I think, is probably Contact. Again, because of that guitar intro, there's so few elements to pick up on across the album, but each time, like, they are so pleasant and enjoyable. And that Contact for me is like where the sound and the mix is so perfect and so clear and crisp. And I just really, really adore how that album, or that song, sorry, sounds. So I think most people are probably familiar with Message in a Bottle and Walking on the Moon, which, nice touch. First tracks on the side A and then side B. That, you know, keep them listening to the whole album that way, which is really clever. But yeah, Contact, like, if anybody hasn't listened to the album and just like knows the singles and the big hits from the Police, like, give that one a listen. I would have really liked it if that had been the last song on the album. He did have a couple of other releases that were kind of like smaller singles. I think This Bed's Too Big Without You is another one that was kind of released. It might have been a UK only single, but Message in a Bottle and Walking on the Moon are like the standout singles for obvious reason. And as I say, Contact, like, if you haven't heard, give that one a listen. The only downside I will say with this is that like most of the songs, if not all of the songs, just have a fade out. And I know that's kind of, you know, different era, different approach to music, but like, come on, some of these songs could have just had like a definitive end note that would have suited them perfectly. And that, I think, is especially what lets down No Time This Time, because like the final song on the album ends with a fade out. It feels like a bit of a cop out. Like, they're all still great songs, but like, just hit a final note, innit? You know. But yeah, like there's not a ton that can be said for this album. Like I say, it's so simple. It's such a pared down approach. Like it's incredibly efficient, you know, personnel and instrumentation and everything. It's like such a nicely made album. So yeah, if you don't have a copy, like just pick one up. Like they are dead cheap. I mean, this one is, I don't even know when this one's from, but I mean, it is old. Really old. This isn't a special edition or a remaster or anything. I think the first remaster was in like 2003 anyway, so like this certainly is older than that. Yeah, like you won't be paying a ton to get a copy of this, so just grab one, honestly. Potentially some of the later versions of them, some of the remasters, I'm sure there've been more than one remaster now. Potentially some of them might not have the fade outs. They might have sort of gone back and sort of put in some hard finishes to the tracks, but certainly this one, it's fade outs. But you know what? I don't mind it that much. It's a great album all the same. So yeah, if you haven't heard it, like do definitely give it a check. It's such a cracking album, such a classic album from such a classic band, and you know, for a band that was as popular as they were, like I always sort of think of popular bands as perhaps not having the chops that underground bands might have, but you know what, Stuart Copeland especially, like he's one of the best drummers of all time, like without a doubt. So I think if you're into your drumming in particular and you haven't listened to this album, you're doing yourself a disservice. Like give it a listen, because it's nothing but amazing drumming all the way through, and the rest of it is pretty damn solid as well. We're talking 9s out of 10s bare minimum most of the way, so yeah, give it a listen.